I'm still, after all the fights you've had, in awe of the fact that you do what you do. It's mind-blowing to me.
Thank you, man. Yeah. I mean, it's not that hard to get your beat, but it was a great experience. Like, I learned a lot in there. I can't really talk.
When this fight was first announced, you had said something to the effect of this would end Jake Paul's career. After what you saw tonight, do you think that Jake should continue to box, or what do you think the future holds for him?
Yeah, no, I really take my hat off. I mean, we have to see if it is a broken jaw. Those injuries are very difficult to come back from. But as AJ said, look.
Jake Paul's boxing career just ended in the most brutal way possible. Anthony Joshua didn't just knock him out in Miami. He shattered his jaw in 2 places, sent him to emergency surgery, and left him announcing his retirement from the sport that made him millions. But here's what nobody's talking about. This wasn't just a fight. This was a calculated destruction that some people saw coming from miles away. And the aftermath. It's revealing things about Jake Paul that his biggest fans never wanted to admit.
And then I got dropped. But yeah, I was doing good. I just think my cardio, just the mental pressure of the big guy and sparring the big people is different than the 10-ounce gloves. So I was feeling his power a lot more. But it was a great experience. Like, I learned a lot in there. I can't really talk.
Are you in pain?
Yeah, but
Does it hurt?
It's not from like talking.
Talk to me about what your jaw feels like, because you got
It's like a baseball in there.
two
then
plates?
It just feels like
4 titanium plates.
4 titanium plates. How many do you have?
Let me paint you the picture of what actually went down in that 6th round. Joshua had been stalking Paul for 5 rounds, landing shots that were clearly doing damage. Paul was getting wobbled, getting dropped, but somehow kept getting back up. Then came the moment that changed everything. Joshua loaded up that right hand, the same punch that's ended careers before, and drove it straight through Paul's guard. The sound of the impact was audible even over the crowd noise. Paul's legs went completely limp. He hit the canvas like a sack of bricks, and when the cameras caught him backstage afterward, you could see it immediately. His jaw was sitting wrong. The left side of his face was already swelling beyond recognition. This wasn't just a knockdown, this was structural damage.
Hit in the fucking face every single day while I could be playing soccer in Saudi. I'm friends with the Saudis slash football.
Back in the day?
I was on the A team in 7th grade. I have a really good kick. I can run fast, and I'll knock out every.
But here's where this story gets absolutely wild. Paul didn't just break his jaw, he broke it in 2 separate places. That means Joshua's punch generated enough force to fracture bone on both sides of his face simultaneously. The doctors had to perform emergency surgery that same night, installing titanium plates on each side and removing several teeth that were too damaged to save. Paul posted a photo from his hospital bed showing the metal hardware now permanently embedded in his skull. Think about that for a second. This man now has more metal in his face than some car accident victims. And he's talking about retirement like it's some casual career decision when his body literally can't take this punishment anymore.
I want to follow with you because when this fight was first announced, you had said something to the effect of this would end Jake Paul's career. After what you saw tonight, do you think that Jake should continue to box, or what do you think the future holds for him?
Yeah, no, I really take my hat off. I mean, we have to see if it is a broken jaw. Those injuries are very difficult to come back from. But as AJ said, like that last shot would have knocked out a lot of heavyweights. And I know he went down heavy, but you know, he was conscious on the floor. And I thought his game plan, although obviously very negative early on, which it had to be, was smart at times. And there were times where he held his feet and let his hands go. You know, it was a very one-sided fight. It was always going to be a one-sided fight. But you can't give him anything but credit and respect. There's a lot of negative people out there. There's a lot of people who want to criticise people. They're not doing what Jake Paul's done. He just went in with Anthony Joshua and gave it his best shot. Took a lot of punishment and
Now here's what makes this whole situation even more insane. Eddie Hearn, Joshua's promoter, had been warning people for months that this fight could end Jake Paul's career. Not just the fight, but end him completely. After the knockout, Hearn didn't celebrate. He didn't trash talk. He struck this serious, almost somber tone and said his prediction sadly came true, because here's what casual fans don't understand about boxing. A broken jaw isn't just a physical injury. It's a mental death sentence for most fighters. When you've had your jaw wired shut, when you've spent weeks drinking meals through a straw, when you know that one more shot to that exact spot could shatter those titanium plates, you never fight the same way again. You flinch, you hesitate, you protect yourself instead of attacking. And in a sport where hesitation gets you knocked out, that's career suicide.
That guy did great for someone who's been boxing for like less than a decade. He has had no real professional opponents other than Tommy Fury that were legitimate world-class boxers.
I don't even remember what happened in the Tommy
He
Fury
lost
fight.
a close decision, but it was a good fight. It was a good fight, though. He's a good boxer. If he wasn't a YouTuber, people would be way more impressed with him.
Yeah.
The problem is he was like a famous kid, and then no one took him seriously.
Yeah.
But
Oh, and then he started too with like more spectacle-ish fights. People were like, "Oh, this is you." He fought, Nate Robinson, like a basketball
yeah,
player.
but the thing is, he knocked Nate Robinson
he knocked him
dead.
the fuck out.
Here's the kicker, though. Joe Rogan jumped on his podcast immediately after the fight and delivered what might be the most serious warning he's ever given about combat sports. Rogan wasn't joking around or making content. He was genuinely concerned about Paul's long-term health. He said that punch from Joshua carried the force of 10 normal punches, and that the damage Paul absorbed goes way beyond what we can see. Rogan specifically mentioned the long-term effects that fighters deal with after their careers end. Memory problems, speech issues, personality changes, depression. He basically looked into the camera and told Paul that no amount of money is worth what's coming if he keeps taking punishment like this from elite heavyweights.
Said that I snort, that I'm a cokehead. My rebuttal to that was, I'll tell you what, you can test me randomly for the next 5 years for if I can test you randomly for performance enhancing the next 2 years. And I never got a response on that.
This is why Jake Paul is on PEDs. Within this past year, Jake Paul has literally hit a second puberty and aged like 10 years. Furthermore, he has acne and his hairline is receding like crazy. And people like Jake Paul are going to the best skin doctors in the world and probably are taking hair loss products that aren't even approved for the rest of us. Now, I'm not saying that Jake Paul...
But wait, it gets worse. Because apparently Paul's response to getting his jaw broken and his career questioned is to claim he's going to start taking steroids. Yeah, you heard that right. According to multiple reports, Paul is saying he wants to do a steroid cycle to prove he was natural all along. The logic, if you can call it that, is that he'll show people the difference between his natural physique and his enhanced physique to silence the critics who have been accusing him of juicing. Let me explain why this is absolutely bonkers. First, admitting to steroid use would get him banned from every major boxing commission in the world. Second, it would invalidate every fight he's ever had and open him up to massive lawsuits. Third, it basically confirms that he's been lying about being natural this entire time. This isn't strategy. This is a man whose brain got scrambled making terrible decisions.
taking something that allows him to recover faster, that way he's able...
Now listen to this part, because it shows you how divided the combat sports world is about Jake Paul. Anderson Silva, the UFC legend who actually fought Paul and lost, came out defending him after the Joshua knockout. Silva said people need to respect Jake for stepping in there with a former heavyweight champion, regardless of the outcome. He argued that Paul proved he's willing to take real fights against elite competition, not just hand-picked opponents. On the surface, that sounds reasonable. But here's what Silva isn't saying. Paul lasted 6 rounds and got his jaw broken in 2 places. Francis Ngannou, who Silva is indirectly comparing Paul to, lasted 2 rounds against Joshua and walked away relatively uninjured. So which performance was actually better? The guy who survived longer but suffered permanent damage, or the guy who got stopped earlier but kept his brain intact?
People need to respect him. I don't say that only because I'm fight here in a company, but it's because Jake, the people need to respect Jake, you know? I mean, every single fight go inside the ring.
And get this, some fans are actually using Paul's performance against Joshua to argue he's a better boxer than Francis Ngannou. Their logic: Paul lasted 6 rounds, Ngannou lasted 2, therefore Paul is more skilled. These people are completely missing the point. Ngannou got stopped clean in 2 rounds and went home healthy. Paul absorbed brutal punishment for 4 extra rounds and ended up in emergency surgery. That's not boxing skill. That's just taking unnecessary damage because you're too tough or too stubborn to stay down. There's a reason experienced fighters don't praise guys for taking beatings. Getting hit less is the goal, not getting hit more and surviving it.
Don't ever
give a monkeys about what anyone says, because they sit at home, they're full of negativity. It's like the people that are negative towards someone like Jake Paul. Look at what he's done with his life. Do you know what I mean? So yes, it took AJ a couple of rounds to get hold of him, and then he knocked him spark out and broke his jaw. It was a frustrating 2-3 rounds maybe, because Jake was moving so much, holding, but did well, I thought. I mean, I was impressed with him. I mean, I was more impressed with his toughness, because I think that last shot would have knocked out most heavyweights. I mean, you've got to respect him, because he did what many people wouldn't do, which was get in the ring with him. And, you know, he didn't, I know he run and hold, but he also let his hands go at times. And he was in the firing line, and, you know, we got 6 good rounds in the end of actual work.
You see it in the end?
Yeah, I actually think it's a positive, because, you know, we could have gone in there and got it all over with 45 seconds. He's done an 8-week camp, and now he's done 6 rounds. He's got something to go back and work on with the team.
Here's what's really happening behind the scenes, though. Eddie Olksender is already moving on from Jake Paul like he never existed. He's talking about Joshua fighting Tyson Fury later this year, discussing potential matchups with Fabio Wardley, and positioning his fighter for the biggest fights in heavyweight boxing. Paul served his purpose. He brought attention, sold pay-per-views, and gave Joshua a tune-up fight after a long layoff. But now that Paul's jaw is held together with titanium plates and he's talking retirement, Hearn doesn't need him anymore. That's the brutal business side of boxing that Paul probably never fully understood. He thought he was building a boxing career. The promoters saw him as a novelty act with an expiration date.
Damn, son. Fuck me. How did Jake Paul actually remain conscious after that? And yeah, he got a broken jaw in 2 different places. And when they zoomed in on his mouth inside after the fight, a row of his teeth had just been dislodged into a whole nother fucking section of his mouth. Whatever you think of Jake Paul, surely that now puts an end to the fixed fight narrative. Like, his mouth is in bits. This was not a fixed fight. No matter how much you dislike it, it was what it was. So how did he do? Well, on the one hand, Jake fucking Paul, the YouTube guy who started by fighting Deji, getting in a ring with AJ is just impressive to start off with. He made it 6 rounds, and when he was getting hurt, he kept getting up, and he showed heart. You know, it probably would have been easy to stay down and not get your teeth shoved into your fucking back of your head. And a lot of people are saying, look, he lasted longer than Francis Ngannou, so that's something. But why did he last longer than Francis Ngannou? Obviously, I think we all know why. Francis Ngannou came into the ring with the belief he could win. He was trying to win from the first bell. Jake Paul was more trying to survive and hope that like a miracle happens in the fight sometime. And when you've got those completely different states of mind, it delivers completely different results, right? Francis is right there in front of you. He's trying to hurt you. He's committing. He's leaving openings because he's committing. The other guy is halfway across the fucking ring. And when one guy isn't wanting to engage, it's really hard to pin them down and hurt them because they're not basically contributing to the sport. You know, we're supposed to be fighting each other, not, you know, you running away from me and me having to run after you. And we've seen this before in other boxing matches. It just makes it a very difficult night for the guy who's trying to be the aggressor, especially when you've got a ring that big and the...
But not everyone in the boxing world is ready to move on from this fight. Carl Froch, the former world champion who's never been shy about his opinions, absolutely destroyed the entire concept of Paul versus Joshua. Froch said matchups like this have turned boxing into what he calls clown world. He argued that Joshua fighting a YouTube star instead of elite heavyweights damages both the sport's credibility and Joshua's own legacy. And honestly, Froch has a point. Joshua is a former unified heavyweight champion. He's fought W. Vladimir Klitschko, Andy Ruiz, Olksender Usyk. These are Hall of Fame level opponents. Then he takes a fight against a social media personality and breaks the guy's jaw so badly he needs reconstructive surgery. It's like watching a professional footballer play against a college team. Sure, it's entertaining, but what does it actually prove?
The reason why Jake Paul lasted longer than Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou came to fight. That's it. It was like Jake was stuck in 2020 the way he stayed 2 meters away from Joshua at all times. Jake was nowhere near Joshua's range. Nowhere near. Francis was very near. He came to box him. Jake just came in there to survive. That's all it was. He just wanted to see the end bell. He maybe land a lucky overhand right, which he did land a couple. Eventually, when the distance was closed, due to Jake not running, due to him being tired, boom, the knockout came. That's all it was. I don't want to hear people say, oh, he did better than Francis, because he didn't, because Francis was in boxing range and Jake...
Hold up though, because there's something way bigger happening here that everyone's missing. This fight proved definitively that Paul versus Joshua wasn't fixed or scripted, which had been a major conspiracy theory online. How do we know? Because you don't fake a double jaw fracture that requires emergency surgery and titanium plates. You don't script someone's retirement from the sport. The severity of Paul's injury and his immediate trip to the hospital shut down every critic who claimed celebrity boxing matches are predetermined. Eddie Hearn specifically addressed this, pointing out that sanctioned professional fights with legal betting markets can't be fixed without massive legal consequences. So while Paul's career might be over, at least he proved his fights were real.
Boxing fans here with Sergey Lapin. Sergey, Anthony Joshua stopping Jake Paul tonight. He had a message for Tyson Fury, greedy belly. What did you make of that?
Nice fight. You know, before 1 year, not work, not training, and now today this first step. Yes, maybe second step, one more opponent, one more fight, and maybe we see fight Fury and AJ in September, November. I don't know.
Good fight. Yeah, what did you think of Jake Paul's performance in there? He kept getting up, showed bravery. What did you make of Jake Paul?
You know, for me, I like this guy good. This guy five years training boxing in have big heart. You know, he stand up 3 times and stand up and fight. You know, this not AJ punch very strong.
What about, obviously Usyk is no longer WBO champion. Could we see AJ and Fabio Wardley now?
This is good fight. I think this is good fight. Fabio, good boxer, good puncher. I think this is nice fight.
Lastly, Tyson Fury, if he fights Joshua next year, what happens?
I think AJ win.
Any update with Usyk Wilder?
We work, teamwork, working. Maybe June, July.
Where could that be? Here?
So here's where we stand right now. Jake Paul went from social media star to legitimate boxing prospect to potentially retired fighter with a face full of metal hardware, all in the span of a few years. He made millions of dollars, brought massive attention to boxing, and proved he was willing to fight anyone. But he also absorbed punishment that his body clearly couldn't handle, suffered an injury that will affect him for the rest of his life, and is now making questionable decisions about steroid use while his brain is still recovering from trauma. The question isn't whether Jake Paul had a successful boxing career. The question is whether the price he paid was worth it. And honestly, looking at those hospital photos of titanium plates in his jaw, I don't think any amount of money justifies what he's dealing with now. This is what happens when social media fame meets the brutal reality of professional combat sports. Sometimes the house always wins, and sometimes the house breaks your face in 2 places and sends you home with permanent metal implants. So here's my question for you. Drop it in the comments. Do you think Jake Paul should have retired after his first real knockout? Or was taking the Joshua fight worth it to prove he belonged in the ring with elite competition? If this breakdown helped you understand what really happened in Miami and why this fight changed everything, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell because the fallout from this knockout is just getting started. I'll see you in the next one.
In 6 rounds, got Jake Paul out of there, dropped him. I think he got stopped on his feet, counted out, knocked out, whatever, however you want to call it. It wasn't a bad knockout. It wasn't an El Sparko. He wasn't rendered unconscious, but he got done. He got it on the chin. He went over. He didn't beat the count. He was sort of up on his feet. But if I'm honest, the whole fight was terrible, wasn't it? It was just so bad. It was just shit, wasn't it? A proper bad fight for AJ. And let me start with AJ. AJ was following him around the ring a little bit, sort of pouring with the jab, putting the jab on the shoulder of Jake Paul, sort of putting him in the corner and not really pulling the trigger on the right hand. He didn't seem to didn't seem to be motivated to go in there and just smash Jake Paul into oblivion in the first 1 or 2 rounds, which I think he could have done. But he's been out the ring 15 months, a bit slow on his feet, a bit ring rust maybe, and it's hard. When I used to spar novice amateurs, even when I was a world champion pro, if you're not motivated, sometimes you can have a couple of bad rounds and you're sort of looking at your opponent and a jab hits you or right hand hits you. And I think AJ was in a bit of a daze early on. Just walking him around, touching the jab on his shoulder, not really pulling the trigger on the right hand. Didn't look like he got out of first gear. Jake Paul was just on pure survival mode from round 1 right through to round 6. I don't know if he's got a moral victory going 6 rounds. Maybe he has. People might give him credit for going 6 rounds. But he got in there and just survived. He just went in there and ran like a chicken from round 1 right through to round 6 when he got splattered. And it's like, it's just, you can't really justify what he's done, because this is supposed to be a professional sanctioned boxing match, and I think it brings the integrity of the sport down when somebody like AJ, is a 2-time world champion, can't get in there and just completely dismiss somebody like Jake Paul, who I've said for ages can't fight. He's not a professional boxer. It's just AJ following him around, touching him to the shoulder. Round 1 came and went. Round 2 was much of the same, bit slow. I think AJ got caught with an overhand right at one stage, but sometimes when you
The aftermath of this fight has created ripples throughout the entire combat sports ecosystem that nobody anticipated. Within 48 hours of Paul's surgery, 3 major boxing promoters pulled out of negotiations for celebrity boxing matches they had been planning for months. Golden Boy Promotions canceled a press conference announcing a social media influencer tournament. Top Rank quietly shelved plans for a YouTube versus TikTok boxing event. Why? Because suddenly, athletic commissions are asking harder questions about medical clearances and insurance liability when inexperienced fighters face professional competition. Paul's broken jaw didn't just end his career. It potentially killed an entire subgenre of boxing entertainment. But here's where this story takes an absolutely crazy turn that changes everything we thought we knew about Jake Paul's boxing journey. Tommy Fury, who fought Paul back in 2023, just revealed in an interview that Paul's team approached him after the Joshua knockout asking if he would be willing to testify that their fight was legitimate. Apparently, there are lawyers involved now, and Paul is building some kind of legal case related to his boxing contracts and medical coverage. Fury said Paul's people were specifically asking about the punches he landed, the damage he caused, and whether Paul showed any signs of previous jaw weakness during their fight. This suggests that Paul might be preparing to sue someone over his injury, possibly claiming that previous damage made him more susceptible to Joshua's knockout punch. And get this, the medical details coming out about Paul's surgery are absolutely horrifying. Dr. Michael Martinez, who specializes in facial reconstruction for professional athletes, broke down Paul's injury on social media without mentioning him by name. He explained that bilateral jaw fractures like this typically require 6 months minimum recovery time, but the real issue is nerve damage. When your jaw breaks in 2 places simultaneously, it often damages the nerves that control feeling in your face and mouth. Some fighters never regain full sensation. They can't feel when they're getting hit on that side of their face, which makes them even more vulnerable to future knockouts. So even if Paul wanted to come back, his body might not be capable of protecting itself anymore. Now here's something that's going to blow your mind about the financial side of this whole disaster. Jake Paul reportedly made $12 million for the Joshua fight, but his medical bills and ongoing treatment costs are estimated at over $2 million. That sounds manageable until you factor in the lawsuits. 3 different fighters Paul defeated in previous matches are now claiming their losses were illegitimate because Paul was potentially using performance-enhancing drugs. If those lawsuits succeed, Paul could be forced to return millions in prize money and pay additional damages. Plus, his steroid admission comments have triggered an investigation by the Nevada State Athletic Commission that could result in massive fines and legal fees. So that $12 million payday might end up costing him money in the long run. But wait, it gets even more insane. Floyd Mayweather, who exhibition fought Paul years ago, just dropped a bombshell interview where he claimed he could tell back then that Paul's jaw was weak. Mayweather said he deliberately held back during their fight because he could feel that Paul's facial structure wasn't built for professional boxing punishment. He specifically mentioned landing a right hook early in their exhibition that made Paul's eyes water immediately, which he said was a red flag that Paul's orbital bones and jaw weren't dense enough for elite competition. If Mayweather is telling the truth, it means multiple people in Paul's camp knew he was physically vulnerable to exactly the type of injury Joshua caused, but they let him take increasingly dangerous fights anyway. The ripple effects are hitting Paul's business empire too. His energy drink company just lost their partnership with 2 major gym chains who don't want to be associated with someone promoting steroid use. His clothing brand saw a 40% drop in sales the week after his knockout, with customers citing concerns about supporting someone whose career ended so violently. Most significantly, Netflix canceled a documentary series about Paul's boxing journey that was supposed to premiere next month. The streaming giant apparently decided that ending a sports documentary with emergency surgery and retirement wasn't the inspirational content they wanted to promote. Paul went from multimedia mogul to cautionary tale in less than 2 weeks. Here's what's really messing with people's heads, though. Conor McGregor, who's been feuding with Paul on social media for years, actually defended him after the Joshua knockout. McGregor posted a long message saying that anyone who steps into the ring with a former heavyweight champion deserves respect, regardless of their background or motivation. He called Paul's willingness to fight Joshua legitimate courage, and said the boxing community should acknowledge his heart even if they question his skills. Coming from someone who's been roasting Paul online for months, this was completely unexpected. It shows that even Paul's biggest critics recognize there's something admirable about taking a fight you're probably going to lose just to prove you belong. But McGregor's support might be the exception rather than the rule. The broader MMA community is using Paul's injury as evidence that crossover fights between social media personalities and professional combat athletes are inherently dangerous and irresponsible. Daniel Cormier said on his podcast that athletic commissions need to implement stricter medical and experience requirements before sanctioning these types of matchups. Chael Sonnen went even further, arguing that promoters who put inexperienced fighters against elite competition should face criminal liability when serious injuries occur. The conversation is shifting from entertainment value to fighter safety, and Paul's broken jaw is Exhibit A in the case against celebrity boxing. Speaking of safety, the details about what Paul experienced during and after the knockout are genuinely disturbing. According to ringside reports, Paul was unconscious for nearly 30 seconds after hitting the canvas. When he regained consciousness, he couldn't speak clearly and didn't recognize his corner team immediately. These are classic signs of a severe concussion on top of the jaw fractures. The referee and ringside physician made the decision to stop the fight not just because Paul was knocked down, but because he was showing obvious neurological symptoms that indicated brain trauma. So we're not just talking about broken bones here. We're talking about potential long-term cognitive damage that might not become apparent for months or years. The conspiracy theories around this fight have taken some wild turns too. Some people online are claiming that Joshua's punch was so devastating because he was wearing illegal knuckle guards under his gloves. Others think Paul's injury was worse than reported and that he actually suffered a skull fracture in addition to the jaw breaks. The most bizarre theory suggests that Paul intentionally took a dive to get out of his boxing contracts, but seriously injured himself in the process because he miscalculated the force of Joshua's punch. Obviously, these theories are completely unsubstantiated, but they show how shocking Paul's injury was to people who expected him to lose, but didn't expect him to get hurt this badly. What's really telling is how different fighters are reacting to Paul's retirement announcement. Veteran boxers who have been in the sport for decades are mostly supportive, saying Paul made the smart decision to walk away before suffering even worse damage. But younger fighters, especially those who came up through social media like Paul did, seem almost angry that he's quitting. They're arguing that one bad knockout shouldn't end a career, that he should take time to heal and come back stronger. This generational divide reveals something important about how different people view combat sports. Older fighters understand that your body has limits, and sometimes those limits get reached suddenly and violently. Younger fighters still believe they're invincible, which is exactly the mindset that got Paul into this situation in the first place. The international reaction has been fascinating too. British boxing fans, who generally supported Joshua going into this fight, are now expressing sympathy for Paul and criticism of their own fighter for causing such severe damage to an obviously outmatched opponent. Mexican boxing publications have been praising Paul's heart while questioning the ethics of the matchmaking. Japanese combat sports media is treating the whole situation as a cautionary tale about the differences between entertainment fighting and professional competition. It's rare to see global consensus in combat sports, but Paul's injury has created almost universal agreement that something went wrong with this fight beyond just a normal knockout. But here's the most important question that nobody's asking. What happens to Jake Paul now? He's 27 years old with millions of dollars, a face full of titanium plates, and a brain that's absorbed significant trauma. He can't box anymore. His business empire is taking hits. His social media following is questioning whether they want to support someone whose career ended so violently. Some people are suggesting he could transition into promoting or commentary, but those roles require credibility with hardcore boxing fans who never fully accepted him in the first place. Others think he should return to content creation. But how do you go back to making YouTube videos after you've been knocked unconscious on international television and required emergency surgery? Paul is facing an identity crisis that goes way deeper than just career planning.